Hey everyone. If you've been subscribed to the podcast for a while, then there's a good chance you might have seen a poll that I created a while back, sometime in the first half of 2020. Now, this was my first time, messing around with the poll feature, asking the audience questions. So the first poll was just, something basic. I asked what your favorite type of news segment was. The options here were fossils and evolutionary history, medical developments and bioengineering, biology and politics and religion, exoplanets and life in space, and the discovery of new species. When I made the poll, I honestly didn't know what the results were going to be. I thought that out of all of them, maybe something like new species and life in space would be more popular than they actually were. And the popularity of fossils and evolutionary history, that actually kind of surprised me. But it makes sense that people are interested in medical developments and bioengineering, because that stuff can have, a real, meaningful, beneficial impact on someone's life. And that stuff can save people's lives. It makes sense then that medical developments and bioengineering got second place. In contrast, perhaps life in space is just a little too abstract and theoretical. It's more off-world, I guess you could say. Maybe it's more of a niche topic than I thought. It's one of my favorite things, and sometimes I overestimate the public's enthusiasm for alien microbes. Now, biology in politics and religion was an option that I honestly never really expected to gain much popularity, but it was a topic that I covered from time to time, and I wanted to include it just to see what would happen. All of that was not all that popular. And that's okay, I totally get it. You probably subscribe to this channel to hear me talk about biology, and not tangential issues like how people deny or ignore biology, and how that frustrates and annoys a particular podcast host. However, I'm gonna leave this door open. If my audience wants more videos with some angry ranting about how people misunderstand or deny biology, just let me know, and I'm sure I'll find something to rant about. Now, the thing that kind of confused me was the really big difference between the discovery of new species, which tied for the lowest score, and fossils and evolutionary history, which was more than 4 times as popular. Both involved the discovery of new species, or an expanded understanding of known species and ecologies. Discovery of extinct species tells us about ancient environments, just like the discovery of modern species tells us about modern environments. So, what would account for the difference in popularity of these two options? Perhaps the evolutionary history stuff is more fascinating and fantastical because we find just the bones, and then we have to mentally visualize what the creature might look like, and then, our imagination can really have some fun with it. Or perhaps people are more interested in the evolutionary stuff because it's kind of like history. It's like biological history, and every new development helps us understand why and where we are where we are. But I feel like you could make the same case for newly discovered living species. So, I don't know. No, I had fun with this poll. It surprised me in some ways, I expected some things in other ways, and I wanted to make more of them for you guys to answer and have fun with. So I decided to make a new poll at the beginning of every month. And I also wanted to make a video at the end of every year going through each poll and talking about the results. Now, I only made 3 polls for 2020, but from here on out, I hope to make 12 polls a year and have a video about them come out shortly after New Year's the following year. And I'm also going to try and post all of these polls. I'm going to try and post them on the first of the month. So, January 1st, February 1st, blah, 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 June, August 1st. First of the month, come to the podcast, go to the community channel, check out the poll. If I haven't posted it by your time yet, check back on the 2nd, I'll have posted it by then. Okay, now, as for the 3 2020 polls, the first poll from October 1st asked, what's your favorite vertebrate clade? This is a pretty basic softball question. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Those were the options. And I asked people to explain their answer in the comments, but no one did, so that was kind of awkward. I found it a little funny, but I also got, somewhat fewer votes on this poll as well. So that makes me think that asking people to explain their reasoning might have spooked a couple people off, so I'm not going to do that in the future. Anyway, fish and reptiles were both equally popular, with amphibians holding a strong lead over both of them. But the birds, surprisingly, were totally unpopular, with 0 votes, while the mammals swept the scoreboard with, fully half the votes. Now my guess here is that everyone is super familiar with mammals. Your family and friends, your pet dog, cat, ferret, and hamster, and the cattle and the pig that you eat, they're all mammals. And then you have charismatic megafauna, like tigers, gorillas, giraffes, hippos, rhinos, elephants, bison, and moose, among, so many others. It's hard not to love all of these animals when they're all so intriguing and fascinating and aesthetically beautiful. I think the most likable thing about mammals is just how likable they are. They're warm and cuddly. That's literally part of what makes them mammals, being warm-blooded, heat-producing endotherms covered in fur. Also, they're so emotive, and we can detect, or at least we think we can detect, their emotions to some degree based on posture, facial expressions, a bit of human projection. It doesn't surprise me that mammals are thus so popular. This isn't the case for the fish, the reptiles, and amphibians, which are often expressionless and often slimy and/or spiky. While lacking in the warm and cuddly factor, these animals, I think, are charismatic for different reasons. They live in strange places with strange lifestyles. They look weird and unusual, and often monstrous and scary. It's hard not to love this kind of stuff. I mean, who doesn't think that a Gia monster is badass? Who isn't impressed by the evolutionary record of the shark? And even gentler stuff too, like there's tons of frogs and turtles and little lizards that are super adorable, and plenty of fish that are beautiful, shy herbivores. There's something for everyone in these clades. And I suppose the amphibians were slightly more popular, because of the three, they're the rarest, the most alien, and the least understood. And the poor birds. No one likes birds apparently, which is a shame. It's weird because birds are really damn cool. They're the descendants of dinosaurs. They're incredibly effective predators. They're super smart, they have extremely good vision, they completely dominate the sky like sharks and orcas dominate the seas, and they include various species that are just wickedly dangerous or wildly extravagant, or even among birds, freakishly intelligent. But I guess most people think the birds are boring and lame. I mean, that's kind of unfortunate. It's like come on, birds are cool, you guys, I promise. They really are. Just wait until I get to the birds in the main sequence of episodes, and then you'll see. You'll all see how awesome birds are, seriously. Now, the next poll was on November 1st, and naturally, coming right on the heels of Halloween, I asked, what's the scariest or creepiest type of animal? The options given were deep-sea creatures, predatory megafauna, toxic animals, parasites, or the creepy crawlies known as the arthropods. My thinking here was that each type of animal was scary in its own right for its own reasons. The deep-sea creatures, for example, are scary looking in their natural environment. They're monsters with translucent, deformed bodies and unusual appendages and even weirder lifestyles. The nice thing is that they're far and away, deep, deep in the sea, in places that I'm pretty sure I'm never going to end up. Other people appear to agree because this seems to be a pretty popular opinion. It garnered a little less than a third of the vote, roughly between a quarter and a third. And that's a sizable chunk of the voter base, and it's about what I expected for these absurdly monstrous-looking animals. Now, that's not necessarily the case for predatory megafauna. Now, these animals may not necessarily be scary to look at least from a distance, but up close in your face, they're terrifying because they're so big, and because they have the power to destroy you and end your life in an instant. And unless you have like a gun or modern technology, or unless you're really good with a spear and you got a bunch of other people who are good with spears with you, there's really no way to fight back against them except to just avoid them or outsmart them. Whether you're talking about a grizzly bear attacking you and pinning you down and eating you alive, or a tiger or a leopard pouncing on you from behind and snapping your neck, or a zebra, horse, or a moose stomping on you with their hooves and crushing you, or a hippo or an alligator ensnaring you in its jaws and ripping you apart or crushing you that way, the human body it's too frail to offer any meaningful resistance to these animals. The predatory megafauna inspire fear and respect, mostly due to their implacable strength. Now, I live somewhere relatively rural, where I'm potentially exposed to at least two of the animals I just mentioned. People in my community have been killed by these animals before, which is why I think it's totally reasonable to have a healthy fear and respect of them. The audience, however, largely didn't agree. Only 4% of you guys voted for the predatory megafauna, so I was honestly surprised by that. Now compare this to the toxic animals, which may or may not be visually scary, and may not even be that large or that strong. For example, there's lots of little tiny tree frogs that are really beautifully colored and quite aesthetic to look at, but they're extraordinarily poisonous. And if you touch one, get the slime like on your fingers and a cut in your mouth, God forbid, or in your nose, a mucous membrane, or in your eyes, it's gonna mess you up. On the other hand, you have venomous snakes and whatnot, which are creepy, they are scary, and they're actually so creepy and so scary and so deadly that an instinctual fear response to things that resemble snakes has actually been buried deep in our primate genome during our evolutionary history. Surprisingly, no one thought that the toxic animals were scary. I was honestly expecting this option to be a top contender, but once again, the evidence does not support my hypothesis. I was surprised. Now, the most popular option, and this one honestly didn't surprise me that it was popular, but I didn't think it would take the cake. But the most popular option were the tapeworms and the vampire bats and other parasites like that. All I can really add is that, yeah, I agree. If you want to talk about creepy animals, things that suck out your fluids or live inside of you, of your gut or your flesh, and absorb nutrients directly out of your own body, in a way, eating you from the inside out, that's maximum creepy. That's creepy turned up to 11. If you doubt me, just go watch some videos of tapeworms and flatworms and stuff like that getting surgically removed. If creepy doesn't describe what comes out of those people and the quantity, I don't know what does. And lastly, the arthropods, which actually made a relatively weak showing. I honestly figured that people would think these guys were creepy because of their multi-limbed bodies with grossly articulating limbs and faces equipped with numerous eyes and tentacles and mandibles and whatnot. They're the classic creepy crawlies, but I suppose people find them more cool and interesting now instead of scary. Now don't get me wrong, a giant crab or a prawn is interesting as hell, but you can't tell me they aren't creepy monstrous freaks with all of those legs, those slimy interlocking shell plates, those joints with stiffly folded chitinous skin. I mean, it's totally badass and it's cool, but it's also totally creepy, right? And the last poll on December 1st, the last poll of 2020, I asked what body form a theoretical intelligent alien species might have. Now, this is obviously a very, very speculative question, and there's no real right answer. How would we know? So I threw a bunch of different options out there. If we rearrange these options a little bit, this could be displayed like a normative curve, a normative distribution. And so I think that's pretty interesting that appears in this question that's totally random with totally random, anybody's guess answers. Okay, anyway, the options were humanoid biped, like us, or like the classic E.T. or pretty much every alien you see in Star Trek, cetacean-like aquatic aliens, elephant-like quadruped aliens, invertebrate collective aliens, or some kind of alien intelligence that takes the form of a fungal-like web or network. Now, unlike most of the others, this poll turned out, honestly, more or less how I expected it to go. Perhaps with a bit fewer people choosing humanoid biped, and a bit more choosing the fungal network. Now, one thing that people may have been thinking about is the feasibility of contacting the species or communicating with them, of learning from them and seeing them do alien stuff. If an alien is a humanoid biped, then they're so much more familiar and approachable, and it's easier to humanize them, and that makes communication, at least theoretically, easier. And it would seem that a decent chunk of the audience, at least a solid quarter of them, agrees with this assessment. Now, the cetacean and elephant-like aliens would be similar to us in the sense that they're also analogous to vertebrates, macroscopic organisms with a singular individual body, but they would also be different enough that it might be difficult to humanize them. It might be difficult to understand their thinking or their communication, as they may have an entirely different evolutionary niche. It would be like humans trying to communicate or have dialogue with a whale. It's going to be difficult, if not impossible. So in that sense, it makes sense that people may have thought aliens like this wouldn't even be recognized as intelligent, or they may not count as such in the first place. After all, if you're an intelligent, cetacean-like aquatic alien, and you live in the water, and you have flippers with no fingers, you can't really make complex technology, can you? Some people would consider that a defining threshold of an intelligent, sapient alien species. I wouldn't agree with that threshold necessarily, but to each their own. Now, the next two options were much more exotic, virtually science fiction, and I was pleased with how popular they were. By an intelligent invertebrate collective, I was thinking something kind of like the Million Ants from Rick and Morty, or the Tyranids from Warhammer 40k. Something that's just totally alien and weird that we would almost certainly struggle to identify as intelligent. The very idea of an intelligence taking the form of a collective, of a colony made up of lesser minds, is both fascinating and thought-provoking, and also, in many ways, unrealistic. But in the near endless depths of space, who knows? And then, there was the most popular option, the fungal web, or the fungal network. The general idea that I had with this one is kind of like the planetary bio-goddess Awa from the 2009 movie Avatar, or like some kind of decentralized intelligence that takes the form of a dynamic, dispersed, node-based information distribution system. Except in addition to information, you would also have nutrient distribution. Now, honestly, as far as intelligence goes that we would be able to recognize, like sapiens, it runs into a similar problem as the cetacean and elephant-like aliens. Now, this option I honestly think is unrealistic, because it's difficult to see how a higher intelligence or dynamic, human-level sapiens at the very least could manifest in such a body form. But then again, slime molds and fungi are capable of remarkable things, and octopus are startlingly intelligent animals that also have a partially decentralized nervous system. So this option, it may be unrealistic in some ways, but you could make, albeit a bit speculative, you could make a case for it. It'd have to be a good one. In any case, though, I think it would be very difficult to detect this intelligence in the first place. But despite all of this, it was the most popular option. Alright everyone, so what are your thoughts on these polls? I'm pretty sure you can still vote on them, but this video is the closest thing you're gonna get to an official tally, or a finish line kind of a thing. Also, what are your thoughts on this little review episode? Was this fun going over the polls and talking about the results? Or was this boring and I shouldn't even bother making a new one for the polls in 2021? Tell me what you think in the comment section below. Also, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and as always, thanks for listening.